Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, staring at the view screen with tired eyes. He had been awake for 16 hours straight, and his shift was supposed to end 2 hours ago. But something kept him in his chair, a feeling he could not explain. The stars looked the same as always, cold and distant, scattered across the black like salt on a dark table. "Commander, I'm picking up something strange," said Lisa Grant from the pilot's seat. Her fingers moved quickly across her console and her face showed confusion. "It's a distress signal, but it's weak." "Very weak." Jake leaned forward. "Where is it coming from?" "Near the edge of the neutral zone. About 3 hours away if we push the engines." Lisa turned to look at him. Her brown eyes were sharp and alert despite the long shift. "It's not using any standard council frequency. The pattern is old, maybe 50 years out of date." Carlos Martinez, the ship's engineer, walked onto the bridge carrying a cup of coffee. He was a short man with strong hands and a friendly smile. "Did someone say distress signal? Please tell me it's not another false alarm. Last week we chased a signal for 6 hours and found a broken satellite." "This one's different," Lisa said. "It's definitely coming from a ship, and whoever is sending it is using a lot of power. They really want to be found." Jake made his decision quickly. "Set a course. Let's see who needs help out here." The Horizon's Edge was not a large ship, but it was fast and reliable. It had been Jake's command for 3 years, patrolling the borders of human space and making sure nothing dangerous crossed into Earth's territory. Most days were boring, filled with routine scans and paperwork. But today felt different. Dr. Kevin Huang joined them on the bridge as they approached the coordinates. He was the ship's medical officer, a calm man who rarely showed emotion. "Lisa told me we might have casualties. I've prepared the medical bay." "Good thinking," Jake said. "We should be ready for anything." 3 hours later, they found the ship. It was small and damaged, floating dead in space. Parts of its hull were torn open, and several sections were completely dark. Lisa brought the Horizon's Edge alongside it carefully. "Life signs?" Jake asked. Kevin checked his instruments. "Yes, 47 of them, maybe more. They're weak, but they're alive. The temperature inside that ship is barely above freezing. Can we dock with them?" Carlos studied the damaged vessel. "Their airlock is still functional. I can make it work, but we need to be gentle. That ship looks like it could fall apart if we breathe on it wrong." Jake stood up. "Carlos, get us connected." Kevin, prepare to receive casualties. "Lisa, you're with me. Let's go see who we're dealing with." 10 minutes later, Jake and Lisa stood in the airlock waiting for the seal to complete. Both wore full environment suits, not knowing what atmosphere waited on the other side. The indicator light turned green and the door hissed open. The smell hit them first, even through their suit filters. It was the smell of too many bodies in too small a space for too long. The smell of sickness and fear and desperation. Jake stepped through the door and turned on his helmet light. The corridor was dark and cold. Ice had formed on the walls. In the dim light, Jake could see shapes huddled together on the floor, wrapped in thin blankets. They were not human. They had scales that shimmered silver in the light, and their eyes were amber-colored and large. They looked at Jake and Lisa with expressions that mixed hope and terror. "Hello," Jake said slowly. "We received your distress call. We're here to help." One of the aliens stood up slowly. She was thin, so thin that Jake could see the shape of her bones beneath her scales. She spoke in a language Jake did not understand, her voice rough and weak. Lisa touched her helmet, activating the translation software. A moment later, words appeared on Jake's display. "Please do not hurt us. We mean no harm. We are just trying to survive." "We're not going to hurt you," Jake said. "We're from Earth. We're here to help." "How many of you are there?" The alien spoke again. 47 of us remain. We were 63 when we left the last station. The children died first. We could not keep them warm enough." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What happened to you? Why are you out here?" The alien looked at her companions, then back at Jake. "We are Verith. Our world died 5 years ago. The corporations poisoned our oceans and our air. When we asked the Galactic Council for help, they said we were too expensive to save. They declared our planet a failed state and forbid us from entering civilized space. We have been wandering ever since, trying to find someone who would take us. Every port turned us away. Every station closed their doors. We are exiles. The galaxy does not want us." Lisa made a soft sound in her helmet. Jake knew she was trying not to cry. He had heard stories about exiled species, but he had never met one before. The council was supposed to be civilized, supposed to be better than the old ways. But looking at these starving refugees, Jake realized that civilization meant nothing if it did not include mercy. "What's your name?" Jake asked the alien. "I am called Sira. I was a teacher on my world before it ended." "Sira, my name is Jake Morrison. I'm the commander of the Earthship Horizon's Edge. We're going to take you aboard and get you medical care. We have food and warmth. You're safe now." Sira's legs gave out and she fell to her knees. The other Verath began to move, crawling toward Jake and Lisa, reaching out with scaled hands. They were crying, making sounds that the translator could not process. But Jake understood. It was the sound of hope after years of having none. The next 6 hours were chaos. Carlos opened the connections between the ships, and Kevin worked with his medical team to move the Verath onto the horizon's edge. Many could not walk on their own. Some were unconscious. All of them were severely malnourished and dehydrated. 3 of them were so sick that Kevin was not sure they would survive. Jake stood in the cargo bay that had been converted into a temporary shelter. The Verath lay on medical cots wrapped in warming blankets connected to feeding tubes and medical monitors. Kevin moved between them with his team, working to stabilize the worst cases. Lisa stood beside Jake, her face pale. "What are we going to do?" "Council law says we can't harbor exiled species. If we take them back to Earth, we'll be breaking about 30 different regulations." Jake watched Sira, who was sleeping now after Kevin had given her nutrients and warmth. Her face looked peaceful for the first time since they had found her. "I don't care about council law," Jake said quietly. "These are people who were left to die because saving them was inconvenient. Because it cost too much money. Because it was politically easier to declare them exiles than to help them." He turned to Lisa. "We're taking them to Earth. I'll deal with the consequences. The council will demand we turn them over. There will be sanctions, maybe worse. Let them demand whatever they want." Jake's voice was hard. "I joined Earth's fleet to protect people, not to leave them floating in space to die. If that makes me a criminal in the council's eyes, then so be it." Carlos approached them, wiping his hands on a cloth. His usual smile was gone. "I've been looking at their ship's logs. Jake, you need to see this. They've been refused entry at 43 different ports, 43. Some of those were human colonies." Jake closed his eyes. "Set a course for Earth, maximum speed, and send a message ahead to command. Tell them we're coming in with refugees and tell them I take full responsibility for this decision." Lisa nodded and walked away to send the message. Carlos put a hand on Jake's shoulder. "You're doing the right thing, boss." "I hope so," Jake said. "Because I just started something that might change everything." Outside the ship, the stars continued to shine, cold and indifferent. But inside the horizon's edge, warmth was returning to people who had been cold for far too long. And somewhere ahead, Earth waited, unaware that it was about to face a choice that would define its place in the galaxy forever. The message reached Earth 3 days before the horizon's edge arrived. Jake Morrison had sent a detailed report explaining everything: the condition of the refugees, their story, and his decision to bring them home. He knew the message would cause problems, but he did not expect the storm that followed. President Helen Foster sat in the Oval Office, reading Jake's report for the 3rd time. She was a woman in her late 50s with gray hair and sharp intelligence in her eyes. Around her sat the members of her cabinet, all of them arguing about what should be done. "We cannot accept them," said the Secretary of Defense, a tall man named Gregory Palmer. "The Galactic Council has very clear laws about exiled species. If we harbor these Verath, we will face immediate sanctions. Our trade agreements will be terminated. We could be looking at economic collapse." The Secretary of State, Maria Santos, shook her head. "The Council laws are unjust. These people were abandoned to die because it was cheaper than helping them. If we turn them away now, what does that say about humanity?" "It says we're practical," Palmer responded. "It says we understand that we cannot save everyone and we need to protect our own people first." President Foster raised her hand and the room fell silent. 47 refugees will not destroy our economy. And if the Council is willing to end trade with us over this, then maybe we need to reconsider our relationship with them anyway. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "I've been reading the reports about the Council's exile system. In the last 20 years, they've exiled 16 different species. Millions of people cast out into space because they were deemed too difficult or too expensive to integrate. This is not justice. This is cruelty dressed up in bureaucratic language." "What are you proposing?" Maria asked. Helen turned around and her face was set with determination. I'm proposing that we accept these refugees. And not just these 47. I want to establish a formal policy. Any species exiled by the Galactic Council will be welcome on Earth. We will provide sanctuary. The room erupted in protest, but Helen raised her voice. We call ourselves civilized. We claim to be better than our ancestors who turned away ships full of refugees fleeing persecution. But if we turn these people away, we are exactly the same. We are just using different words to justify the same cruelty. Gregory Palmer stood up. Madam President, I must advise against this in the strongest possible terms. The Council will see this as a direct challenge to their authority. We could be risking war. Then we risk war, Helen said quietly, because I would rather fight for what is right than live comfortably with what is wrong. 3 days later, the horizon's edge entered Earth's orbit. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching his home planet grow larger on the screen. Behind him, Sira and several other Verath stood quietly, their amber eyes wide with wonder. Is that Earth? Sira asked softly. The translator made her voice sound almost musical. That's home, Jake said. You're going to land in Houston, Texas. It's warm there and the people are friendly. You'll like it. Sira touched the window with one scaled hand. We never thought we would see a planet again. We thought we would die in the cold dark. Lisa Grant turned from her station. You're safe now, I promise. The ship landed at New Houston Spaceport 2 hours later. A crowd had gathered, held back by security barriers. Some people held signs welcoming the refugees. Others held signs demanding they be sent away. News cameras were everywhere, broadcasting the arrival to the entire planet. Dr. Kevin Huang supervised as the Verath were carefully transported to waiting ambulances. Most of them could walk now after 3 days of food and medical care, but they were still weak. 3 of them had died during the journey despite Kevin's best efforts. Their bodies would be given proper burial according to Verath customs. Jake walked down the ramp and was immediately surrounded by military police. A stern-faced colonel named Patricia Wright approached him. Commander Morrison, I have orders to place you under temporary detention pending an investigation into your actions. You will need to come with me. Jake nodded. He had expected this. I understand. Can I see my crew settled first? I'm afraid not. This way, please. As Jake was led away, he saw President Foster arrive in her transport. She walked directly to where the Verath were being loaded into ambulances, ignoring the shouts from reporters. She approached Sira and spoke to her through a translator device. Welcome to Earth. I am Helen Foster, the leader of this world's government. I want you to know that you are safe here. No one will force you to leave? Sira's legs trembled and she bowed low. Thank you. Thank you. We have no words for this kindness. Helen helped her stand straight. You don't need to bow. You are our guests, and soon, if you wish, you can become our neighbors and friends. She turned to the cameras and raised her voice. Today, I am announcing a new policy for Earth and all human colonies. We are establishing the Sanctuary Protocol. Any intelligent species exiled by the Galactic Council will be welcome here. We will provide medical care, housing, and assistance with integration. Earth's doors open. The crowd erupted in both cheers and angry shouts. Helen ignored both and climbed back into her transport. She had more work to do. The response from the Galactic Council came within hours. Ambassador Thel Non, a tall insectoid being who represented the Council on Earth, requested an emergency meeting. Helen met him in the diplomatic reception hall, with Maria Santos at her side. Thel Non's translator made his clicks and buzzes into cold, formal words. President Foster, the Council is deeply disturbed by your actions. The Verath were legally exiled under Council law. By accepting them, you have violated multiple treaties and agreements. We demand that you immediately surrender all Verath individuals to Council authorities for proper processing. Processing, Helen repeated. Is that what you call abandoning them in space to die? Their planet was declared a failed state. The cost of relocating and integrating them exceeded reasonable limits. The Council made a practical decision. The Council made a cruel decision, Helen said, her voice hard. And Earth will not honor it. The Verath stay here. Thelnon's antenna twitched in what might have been anger or surprise. Then Earth has chosen to stand in violation of Council law. There will be consequences. Trade sanctions will begin immediately. All Council member species are forbidden from conducting business with Earth. Your ships will be denied access to Council jump gates. You will be isolated. We've been isolated before, Helen said. We survived then. We'll survive now. You are making a terrible mistake. The council has stood for 3,000 years. You cannot challenge it and expect to prosper. Helen stood up, ending the meeting. The council has stood for 3,000 years doing the wrong thing. Maybe it's time for something better. After the ambassador left, Maria turned to Helen. The sanctions will hurt us. Food prices will rise. Medicines will become scarce. Technology imports will stop. People will suffer. I know, Helen said quietly. But if we turn away people in need because it's inconvenient or expensive, then what are we? We become just like the council, making practical decisions that ignore basic morality. Meanwhile, in a military detention facility, Jake Morrison sat in a comfortable room that was technically a cell. The door opened and General Raymond Hayes entered. He was an older man with gray hair and a weathered face that had seen many wars. Commander Morrison, Hayes said, sitting down across from Jake. You've caused quite a situation. Yes, sir. I know. The council wants you arrested and tried for violating their laws. Half of Congress wants to give you a medal. The other half wants to court-martial you. Hayes leaned back in his chair. What were you thinking? Jake met his eyes. I was thinking that I couldn't leave them to die, sir. I was thinking that all my life I've been told that humanity stands for something better, that we're different from the old empires and the cruel regimes of the past. But if we turn away refugees because helping them is difficult, then we're not different at all. We're just better at lying to ourselves. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled slightly. Between you and me, I would have done the same thing. But I can't say that officially. He stood up. You're being released. President Foster has issued a full pardon for any violations of council law. You're a free man, Jake stood up quickly. What about my crew? Also pardoned. You're all heroes now, whether you want to be or not. In the weeks that followed, the situation grew more complicated. The council's sanctions hit Earth's economy hard. Prices rose. Some medications became difficult to obtain. Several human colonies that depended on council trade suffered shortages. But something else happened too. Messages began arriving from the dark corners of the galaxy. Other exiled species had heard about Earth's sanctuary protocol. They were asking if the offer was real, if Earth truly would accept them. Lisa Grant volunteered to work with the Refugee Integration Program in Houston. She spent her days helping the Vareth adjust to their new home, teaching them about human customs and learning about theirs. She became close friends with Sira, who slowly began to smile again. One evening, Lisa and Sira sat on a balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Is it always this beautiful? Sira asked. 6 months after the first Vareth refugees arrived, Earth looked very different. Over 12,000 refugees from 9 different exiled species now lived on the planet. The numbers kept growing every week as more ships arrived from the dark spaces between the stars. The Keyleth came next, an insectoid species with 6 legs and crystalline eyes that could see colors humans could not imagine. They had been exiled because they refused to fight in one of the Council's wars. The Council called them cowards. But Jake Morrison, who interviewed many of them, thought they were simply people who valued peace over politics. Then came the Morvani, beings made of living silicon who moved slowly and spoke even slower. Their bodies looked like walking crystal sculptures, beautiful and strange. The Council had exiled them because their method of reproduction involved splitting their consciousness into smaller pieces, which the Council's biology committee declared disturbing and unnatural. Each species brought their own stories of rejection and survival. The Hentari, small furry creatures who lived in family groups of 20 or more. The Zolim, aquatic beings who needed special water tanks to survive. The Praal, who communicated through color changes in their skin rather than sound. Every one of them had been told they were too expensive, too difficult, too different to deserve a place in civilized space. Dr. Nina Collins worked 18-hour days trying to provide medical care for species with completely different biologies. She was a small woman with red hair and endless energy. Her clinic in Houston became famous across the refugee communities because she never turned anyone away, no matter how strange their problems seemed. I have a Morvani patient who is cracking, she told Kevin Huang during one of their rare coffee breaks, literally cracking like a broken window. I have no idea how to treat living silicon. Human medicine does not work on rocks. Kevin smiled tiredly. Have you tried asking them what they need? Of course I did. They told me they need to absorb certain minerals from soil, so now I'm trying to figure out which Earth soils contain the right minerals. I never thought I would become a geologist. But the medical challenges were only part of the problem. Housing 12,000 refugees was stretching every city to its limits. Temporary camps had been set up around major population centers, but they quickly became overcrowded. Food supplies were strained, because different species needed different nutrients. The Kelith could not eat most human food. The Zolam needed live fish. The Morvani did not eat at all, but needed to be buried in mineral-rich dirt for several hours each day, and not everyone on Earth was happy about the situation. In Chicago, a group calling themselves Earth First attacked a building where Vareth families were living. They set fire to the ground floor in the middle of the night. 15 people were injured, including 3 children. 2 Vareth adults died from smoke inhalation trying to save the children. Lisa Grant arrived at the scene hours after the fire was put out. She found Sira standing outside the burned building, her silver scales dark with soot. Sira was holding a small Vareth child who was crying. "They hate us," Sira said quietly. "We came here hoping for safety, but some of them hate us just for existing." Lisa put her arm around Sira's shoulders. "Not all of them. Most people want to help, but there are always some who are afraid of anything different. Fear is not an excuse for murder." "No," Lisa agreed. "It's not." The terrorists were caught within a week. The investigation revealed something troubling. They had been receiving money and instructions from an organization called the Purity Alliance, a radical faction within the Galactic Council. The Alliance was actively trying to destabilize Earth by funding hate groups and spreading propaganda. President Helen Foster called an emergency press conference. She stood before cameras from around the world, her face showing both anger and determination. "Today we learned that the violence against our refugee communities is not just homegrown hatred. It is being deliberately encouraged and funded by forces within the Galactic Council who want to see Earth Sanctuary Protocol fail. They want us to be afraid. They want us to close our doors and turn away people in need. I am here to tell them that their plan will not work. Earth will not be intimidated into abandoning our principles." But the problems kept coming. In Mumbai, a massive protest gathered with over 1 million people demanding that the government expand refugee services. In Moscow, an equally large protest demanded that all refugees be deported. Families argued over dinner tables. Friends stopped speaking to each other. The question of what to do about the refugees divided humanity in ways not seen in decades. Jake Morrison's sister, Christine, was the mayor of Denver. She decided to try something different. Instead of keeping refugees separate in camps, she integrated them directly into the city. Vareth families were given apartments next to human families. Kelith were hired to work in city services. Morvani were consulted on engineering projects. Jake visited his sister 3 months after she started the program. He found a city that was changing in unexpected ways. A Vareth engineer named Korth had redesigned Denver's water reclamation system, using techniques from his dying homeworld, where every drop of water had been precious. The new system was 40% more efficient and saved the city millions of dollars. A group of Kelith farmers had introduced new agricultural methods that worked perfectly in Colorado's climate. They taught human farmers how to grow 3 times as much food using less water. The techniques involved a type of fungus that the Kelith cultivated, which helped plant roots absorb nutrients better. "It's working," Christine told Jake as they walked through a neighborhood where humans and aliens lived side by side. "Not perfectly and not without problems, but it's working. People are learning that these refugees are not a burden. They have skills and knowledge that can help all of us." Jake watched a human child playing with a young Kelith in a park. The Kelith's translator device let them communicate, and they were laughing together over some shared joke. The council said these species were worthless, that they were too broken to integrate. "The council was wrong," Christine said. "These people are not broken. They are survivors, and survivors know things that comfortable people never learn." Carlos Martinez had started a technical school in Houston that taught both humans and refugees. He discovered something amazing about the Morvani. Because their bodies were made of silicon, they had an intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics that human scientists had been struggling with for decades. A Morvani named Quell became Carlos's research partner. Together, they developed new reactor designs that were more efficient than anything humanity had created before. The breakthrough came when Quell explained how energy moved through silicon crystal structures in ways that mimicked quantum entanglement. "I don't fully understand how they think about physics," Carlos admitted to Jake during one of their meetings. "But they see patterns that we miss. It's like they experience reality from a different angle." The new reactor designs were shared freely with all Earth's colonies. Within months, energy costs dropped significantly. The economic damage from the Council's sanctions began to ease. Earth was learning to be independent, but not everyone celebrated these successes. In Seattle, a bomb exploded at a refugee processing center. The building was full of people waiting for medical screenings. The explosion killed 43 people, 28 humans, 10 Verath, 3 Kelith, and 2 Hentari. Over 100 more were injured. Lisa Grant was there that day, helping new arrivals fill out paperwork. She was in a back office when the bomb went off. The force of the explosion threw her against a wall. She woke up in a hospital room 3 days later with burns on her arms and a piece of shrapnel embedded in her shoulder. Sierra was in the bed next to her. She had been standing near the entrance when the bomb exploded. Half of her scales were burned away, and one of her arms was wrapped in specialized bandages that Dr. Nina Collins had developed specifically for Vareth skin. "We survived," Sierra said weakly when Lisa opened her eyes. "Yeah," Lisa whispered. Her throat hurt from smoke inhalation. "We survived, others did not. I saw them die. I saw a human woman throw herself over a Hentari child to protect them from the blast. She died, but the child lived." Lisa felt tears running down her face. "What's her name?" "The woman who died? Catherine Murphy. She was a volunteer. She had only been working at the center for 2 weeks." Over the next few days, as Lisa and Sierra recovered, they watched the news. The bombing dominated every channel. But something unexpected happened. Instead of turning against the refugees, millions of humans were outraged by the attack. Vigils were held in every major city. Donations poured into refugee support organizations. The backlash against the attackers was fierce and immediate. The bombers were caught quickly. Like the Chicago attackers, they had connections to the Purity Alliance. But this time, the evidence was overwhelming. Messages, money transfers, detailed instructions. The council could not deny their involvement. President Helen Foster made another announcement, this one even more dramatic than the last. She stood in the United Nations building in New York, surrounded by representatives from every human colony and several refugee community leaders. "The Galactic Council has shown its true nature. They do not simply exile people and forget about them." 2 years after the first Verath refugees arrived, Earth had become something that had never existed before in the galaxy. It was a world where 16 different intelligent species lived together, worked together, and built a shared future. The population now included humans and millions of beings who had been cast out by the rest of civilization. The transformation was remarkable. What started as a crisis had become an opportunity. The Verath brought medical knowledge learned from adapting to a dying world. The Kalith shared farming techniques that increased food production across the planet. The Morvani's understanding of quantum physics revolutionized human technology. Each refugee species contributed something valuable, something the galaxy had thrown away. Dr. Nina Collins stood in her laboratory in Houston, looking at a vial of clear liquid. Beside her stood a Verath physician named Torin, who had been a leading scientist on his homeworld before it collapsed. Together they had spent 18 months developing something impossible. "Is it ready?" Nina asked. Torin's amber eyes gleamed with excitement. "The final tests are complete. It works on human biology, Verath biology, Kalith biology, and 7 other species we have tested. A universal vaccine that prevents viral infection across multiple biological types." Nina shook her head in wonder. "We could never have done this alone. Human medical science was not advanced enough. We needed your knowledge of adaptive immunity from your dying world. And we needed your genetic sequencing technology," Torin replied. "This is what cooperation creates. This is what the Council threw away when they exiled us. The vaccine would save millions of lives across dozens of species." It was announced at a joint press conference with Nina and Torin sharing credit equally. The news spread across Earth and into space. Even some Council worlds took notice, though they would never admit that exiled species had achieved something their own scientists could not. Meanwhile, Carlos Martinez and his Morvani partner Quell were working on an even more ambitious project. They stood in a massive hangar at the new Houston spaceport, looking up at a strange ship that seemed to shimmer in the light. The calculations are correct, Quell said in his slow, careful way of speaking. This drive will allow faster-than-light travel without using Council jump gates. Carlos grinned. It's slower than the jump gates. We'll only be able to manage about 5 light years per day instead of their 50, but it means we're not dependent on them anymore. We can go anywhere we want. The new drive worked by creating a bubble of twisted space around the ship, using principles that the Morvani understood instinctively, but that human physicists were still trying to fully explain. It required special crystals that the Morvani could grow in their bodies, combined with human engineering and power systems. When do we test it? Carlos asked. Tomorrow. If it works, Earth will be truly free. The test flight was successful. The ship, piloted by Lisa Grant, jumped 5 light years in a single day and returned safely. The celebration at Mission Control lasted for hours. Earth now had the ability to travel the stars without asking permission from anyone. But independence came with dangers. General Raymond Hayes stood in the war room deep beneath Earth Defense Command, studying holographic displays of ship movements. What he saw worried him. They're moving a fleet into position, he told President Helen Foster during their secure communication. 20 Council warships have taken position just beyond Mars. They say it's a routine patrol, but we both know what this really is. Helen's face on the screen looked tired but determined. She was in her second term as president now, her hair completely gray from the stress of the past 2 years. How long before they make their move? Could be days. Could be weeks. But they will make a move eventually. We've embarrassed them. We've proven that their exiled species are valuable. We've shown that their system is built on cruelty, not necessity. They cannot let that stand. What are our options? Hayes gestured to the displays. We have the Coalition Defense Fleet. Ships crewed by humans, Verith, Khalith, Morvani, and others. We've been training together for a year. Our ships are smaller than theirs, but we have advantages they do not expect. The Coalition Defense Fleet was a collection of vessels that combined technologies from multiple species. Verith pilots who had learned to navigate through the dangerous space around their dying star brought skills that Council pilots lacked. Khalith engineers had designed organic systems that could repair themselves during battle. Morvani quantum computers could calculate firing solutions faster than any standard ship computer. The flagship was called the Defiant Star, a name chosen by popular vote among the crews. Admiral Jake Morrison commanded it, promoted from commander after his role in starting the refugee crisis. His first officer was Sira, who had trained at Earth's Naval Academy and proven herself to be a brilliant tactical thinker. Jake stood on the bridge of the Defiant Star, looking at the same displays that General Hayes was watching. The Council fleet sat at the edge of the solar system like a threat waiting to become real. What do you think they will do? Sira asked. She stood beside him, her silver scales now fully healed from the bombing 2 years ago. They will give us an ultimatum, Jake said. Surrender all refugees for deportation and submit to Council authority, or face the consequences. And when we refuse? Then we fight, and we hope that all our preparations are enough. The ultimatum came 3 days later. A Council Enforcement Fleet commander named Admiral Grath sent a formal message to Earth. His species, the Korthari hierarchy, were insectoid beings known for their rigid adherence to rules and authority. His translated voice was cold and emotionless. Earth has violated Council law for 2 years. You have harbored exiled species. You have withdrawn from Council membership without proper procedure. You have developed unauthorized jump drive technology. These violations cannot continue. You have 72 hours to surrender all refugee populations to Council custody and submit to Council governance. If you refuse, we will enforce compliance through military action. This is your only warning. President Helen Foster's response was broadcast across every channel on Earth and transmitted to the Council fleet. She stood in the Oval Office, flanked by refugee community leaders representing each of the exiled species. Admiral Grath, the people you call refugees are now citizens of Earth and her colonies. They are our neighbors, our colleagues, our friends. Some of them are married to humans. Some have children born on Earth. We will not surrender them to you, and we will not submit to an authority that treats intelligence beings as disposable waste. Earth stands by its principles. If you choose to attack us for that, then you will learn what those principles are worth. The 72-hour deadline passed. The Council fleet moved closer, taking position just beyond Earth's moon. Every defense platform in the system went to full alert. The Coalition Defense Fleet launched and formed a defensive line between Earth and the approaching enemy. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant Star, watching the Council ships advance. His crew was a mix of species, all of them working together with practiced efficiency. Sira coordinated the tactical displays. Carlos ran the engineering station, with Quell beside him monitoring the new quantum systems. Lisa Grant was at the pilot's controls, her hands steady despite the tension. "All ships report ready," Sira said. "The Council fleet is signaling. They are demanding we stand down." "Tell them we decline," Jake replied calmly. The Council fleet opened fire first, targeting the defense platforms orbiting Earth. Bright lances of energy streaked across the darkness. The platforms returned fire, their shields flaring under the assault. "All ships engage," Jake ordered. "Protect Earth at all costs." The Coalition fleet moved forward to meet the enemy. The Defiant Star led the charge, its weapons firing in patterns calculated by Morvani quantum computers. The ship twisted and turned through space with precision that came from Vareth navigational skills learned in the dangerous areas around dying stars. The Council ships were larger and more heavily armed, but they moved like they were fighting a conventional enemy. They did not expect the tactics that the Coalition fleet used. Small Kalith ships swarmed around the larger vessels, using their organic systems to confuse enemy sensors. Vareth pilots flew through gaps in the Council formation that other pilots would never attempt. Carlos pushed the new drive system beyond its designed limits, allowing the Defiant Star to appear behind the Council lines and strike from unexpected angles. "The crystals are heating up," he warned. "We cannot maintain this much longer." "Just a little longer," Jake said. "We need to break their formation." The battle raged across the space between Earth and the Moon. Ships on both sides took damage. 2 Coalition vessels were destroyed, their crews lost. But the Council fleet was being driven back by an enemy they did not understand. An enemy that fought with desperation and innovation instead of standard tactics. Then something unexpected happened. 3 of the Council ships suddenly stopped firing. Their transponders changed, signaling neutral status. One of them broadcast a message on all channels. "This is Captain Velen of the Council ship Steady Justice. I cannot participate in this attack. Earth has done nothing wrong. They gave sanctuary to people who needed help. That is not a crime." The 3 energy beams from the Purity Alliance ships streaked toward Earth, bright enough to light up the darkness of space. Each one carried enough power to devastate an entire continent. Millions of people would die if those beams reached the surface. Jake Morrison watched the displays on the bridge of the Defiant Star and felt time slow down. There was no way to intercept all 3 beams. The defense platforms were too damaged. The Coalition ships were too far out of position. He opened his mouth to give an order, any order, but no words came. Then Admiral Grath's heavy cruiser, the Unyielding Law, moved directly into the path of the beams. The massive ship took all 3 hits on its forward shields. The shields flared brilliant white, holding for 3 seconds before they collapsed. The beams burned into the cruiser's hull, tearing through armor and inner decks. "They are sacrificing themselves," Sira said quietly, her voice filled with awe and horror. The Unyielding Law drifted, dead in space, its hull glowing red from the heat. But Earth was safe. The beams had been stopped. The Purity Alliance ships, having fired their main weapons, needed time to recharge. They did not get that time. The Coalition fleet and the Council ships that had switched sides fell upon them with fury. The battle was short and brutal. Within 10 minutes, 2 of the Purity Alliance ships were destroyed. The third tried to retreat but was disabled by weapons fire from a Vareth destroyer. Jake ordered an immediate rescue operation for the Unyielding Law. Medical ships and salvage crews rushed to the damaged cruiser. They found Admiral Grath alive in a sealed command pod, along with 40% of his crew. The rest had died when the beams burned through the ship. Grath was brought aboard the Defiant Star, his insectoid body badly injured but stable. Dr. Nina Collins worked on him personally, using techniques she had learned from treating multiple species. When he woke up 3 days later, he found himself in a human medical bay surrounded by doctors and nurses from 4 different species. "You saved Earth," Jake told him when he visited. "You and your crew gave your lives to protect people you did not even know." Grath's translator made his clicking sounds into words. "I watched you fight for 2 years. I watched you take in people that everyone else abandoned. I watched you build something that should not be possible. Multiple species living together, working together, caring for each other. The Council claims to be civilized, but you showed us what civilization truly means. When the moment came to choose, I could not stand with the side that wanted to destroy that. Your crew died for us. They died for what is right. There is no better reason to die, but I hope I live to see what you build next. The battle changed everything. News of what happened spread across the galaxy faster than light. The story of Earth standing against the Council, of exiled species fighting alongside humans, of Council ships switching sides because they recognized justice when they saw it. All of it became legend within weeks. The Galactic Council fractured. The revelation that the Purity Alliance had tried to destroy Earth caused a political earthquake. 12 member species withdrew from the Council in protest. The Drennick, who had secretly leaked the original documents about the exile system, formally requested asylum on Earth. 3 other species followed. The Korthari hierarchy experienced a civil war. Half of their population wanted to maintain the old ways and their loyalty to the Council. The other half demanded reform and wanted to follow Admiral Grath's example. The fighting lasted for months and devastated several of their colony worlds. But from the chaos, something new began to emerge. Species that had left the Council or been exiled from it started to gather around Earth. They formed a new organization called the Free Worlds Coalition. Its founding principle was simple and revolutionary. Every intelligent species, no matter how small or troubled, deserved dignity and a chance to thrive. President Helen Foster gave the opening address at the first Free Worlds Coalition Assembly. She stood before representatives from 47 different species, speaking from a podium in the newly constructed Unity Hall in Geneva. We have all been told at some point that we were not good enough, that we were too expensive to help, that we were too different to integrate, that we were inconvenient for the powerful, and therefore disposable. But we are here today to say that those judgments were wrong. Every species gathered here has value. Every culture represented here has wisdom to share. We will build a civilization based not on power and convenience, but on compassion and cooperation. The speech was translated into dozens of languages and broadcast across hundreds of worlds. For people who had been cast out, forgotten, or oppressed, it was a message of hope. 5 years after the Battle of Earth, as it came to be known, Jake Morrison retired from the military. He had served as Supreme Commander of the Coalition Defense Fleet, overseeing the integration of dozens of species into a unified force. But he was tired, and he wanted to go home. He returned to Denver to live near his sister Christine, who was now the governor of the Colorado region. The city had grown enormously, becoming one of the premier multi-species cities in the Coalition. Walking through its streets was like walking through a living museum of galactic diversity. One warm evening, Jake took his young niece, Sophie, for a walk through the Central Park. Sophie was 8 years old with her mother's bright eyes and endless curiosity. They passed Verath families having picnics, Keyleth children playing a complicated game that involved climbing trees, and a group of Morvani standing perfectly still in a mineral garden designed specifically for them. "Uncle Jake," Sophie asked, "why did we help all these people when everyone said not to?" Jake thought about the question. He thought about Syrah, now a captain in the Coalition fleet. He thought about Dr. Nina Collins and her universal vaccine that had saved millions. He thought about Carlos Martinez and Quell, whose inventions had revolutionized transportation. He thought about Admiral Grath, who had sacrificed his ship to save a world that was not even his own. Because someone had to remember that every life matters, Jake said. The galaxy forgot that for a while. They started making decisions based on money and politics instead of right and wrong. When you do that long enough, you stop seeing other people as people. You see them as problems or expenses. We could not let that happen to us, but it was hard, right? Mom says a lot of people were angry. It was very hard. Some people were scared. Some people were angry. We had economic problems and violence and arguments that tore families apart. But we kept trying because the alternative was worse. The alternative was becoming the kind of people who could look at someone in need and just walk away. Sophie was quiet for a moment, watching a human child and a young Verath playing together on the swings. I'm glad we helped them. My best friend at school is Keyleth. Her name is Kessa and she is teaching me how to speak in color signals. Jake smiled. That is exactly why we did it. so that kids like you could grow up in a galaxy where being different is not a reason to be cast out, where everyone has a place to belong. They walked further into the park and came to a memorial. It was a tall structure made of stone and crystal, listing the names of everyone who had died in the Battle of Earth. Humans and aliens, Coalition crew and Council crew who had switched sides, all of them remembered together. At the base of the memorial was a simple inscription in 20 different languages. In English it read, "They fought not for conquest or glory, but for the simple right of all beings to be treated with dignity. They are not forgotten." Jake stood there for a long time reading the names. He knew many of them personally. Friends, crew members, people who had believed that something better was possible and had given everything to make it real. "Do you miss it?" Sophie asked. "Being in charge of the fleet?" "Sometimes," Jake admitted. "But what I really wanted was to see what we were fighting for. I wanted to see the future we were trying to build. And here it is, all around us. Multiple species living together. Not just surviving, but thriving. Children from different worlds playing together. Scientists from different civilizations working on problems that affect everyone. This is what we fought for." High above them, ships from hundreds of worlds came and went from Earth's orbital stations. Trade ships, passenger ships, research vessels, all moving freely through space, using the technology that Carlos and Quell had developed. The coalition now included over 200 member species, and that number grew every year. The old Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of what it had been. Many of its member species had left to join the Free Worlds Coalition. Those that remained were forced to reform their policies. The exile system was officially abolished. The Purity Alliance was disbanded and its leaders were tried for war crimes. Lisa Grant had become one of the most famous journalists in the galaxy. Her coverage of the refugee crisis and the Battle of Earth had won every major award. But she still lived in Houston, still worked with refugee integration programs, and still counted Sierra as her closest friend. Dr. Nina Collins continued her research, now leading a multi-species medical institute that was making breakthroughs nobody had thought possible. The universal vaccine was just the beginning. Her team, which included doctors from 12 different species,